It was a typical Friday after my college classes were out, and I was spending the night doing DoorDash. This was my regular routine, dashing on the weekends to help me pay for all my living expenses while on campus. The night started well, getting a lot of orders done and making a good amount, and then it hit a stalemate after the big dinner rush. Very few orders were showing up, and the ones that did, they were very low paying, basically waste of time orders. But then after an hour of aimlessly driving around, an order came through that wasn't too bad. It was 8 miles away, but the payment was well worth it. It was nothing absurd, but enough to make it not a ripoff like a lot of the other ones were. I accepted the order and ran into the restaurant to grab the bag, then hopped in my car and started driving. The map said it would take 30 minutes, which I think was the longest of any orders I'd done up until this point. Most of the houses were right around campus, because any further than 15 to 20 minutes out, it becomes pretty much just bare fields of grass. As I got to that 20-minute mark, it became just that. Very few houses, mostly sitting far out in fields of crops, and nothing else. The rest of the 10-minute drive was on this empty road, going along these farms. Then I made it to the house. There was a dirt driveway connecting to the road, leading through a large field, and in the far back was a small house. Driving through the field felt very eerie. Even though I'm not one to get nervous without reason, this felt different. As I got further out from the road, the only sound was the low rumbling of my car on the dirt. I parked out front and got the bag ready, then left the car on as I stepped out. The night was quiet, and the house was dark, having only the porch light on to illuminate the outside. I walked through the unkempt grass and up to the porch, knocking on the door. As I waited, I looked back at my car, sitting in the dark, with the field of pitch black behind it. A moment went by, then I knocked again, but there was no response, not even the sound of anyone inside. It didn't take long for me to realize the strangeness of the situation, seeing no lights on in the windows and noticing how decayed the house looked up close. The only thing that made me think it couldn't be abandoned was that I had an order for this address, and the porch light was on. I looked at the light, thinking, why would that be the only light? But by some odd chance, I happened to recognize the top portion of the casing having a cheap solar battery. It was just an automatic light that charges during the day and turns on in the evening, meaning nobody had to be here to turn it on. Just as I was piecing this all together though, I heard a rumbling sound behind me. I turned, seeing a car driving down the dirt path and coming up right behind my car. I stood there and stared at their headlights until a man stepped out. I yelled from the porch, asking if this was his order, but he didn't reply. He just stood right next to his car and didn't move or speak. I felt my adrenaline spike as I began realizing how horrible this situation likely was. The silence of the night only reminded me that there was nobody here to help. I was stuck in the middle of a field between an empty house and a stranger. In a split-second instinctual reaction, I dropped the bag and sprinted off the porch, running behind the house and straight into the field of grass. I looked back, seeing the man coming up behind me. Frantically, I continued running, and the further out I got, the thicker and taller the grass became, until it was covering all views of direction. By then, I knew the guy had no chance in following me. I slowed down, catching my breath as I carefully moved through the crops and tried to be quiet in case the man was still trying to find me. Eventually, I made it to someone else's yard and from there I got to a road where I had enough signal to call for help. Police picked me up and went to check on my car, but of course, the man was gone by then. I was surprised though, because my car hadn't been looted, and the bag of food was still on the porch of the abandoned house. But that could only mean that the man had other intentions, likely far worse than just robbing me. A couple years ago, I applied for a temporary job at a local gas station. I was planning to move in 6 months, so I couldn't get anything too permanent, but I still needed to make some cash beforehand. This job paid well, enough to convince me to work the job opening they had for the overnight shift. I would just stay by the register and occasionally do regular maintenance work. This was during my 4th month working there. At some point during this time, I became familiar with a customer that came in pretty frequently. Almost every night, around 1 or 2 a.m., this guy would walk in and buy random different things. Sometimes it was household items, or food, or tools. I always thought it was weird, because he'd come in every night to buy a couple things that would be way cheaper and easier to get at any regular grocery store. He didn't talk much either. All I knew was that his name was Dave, and he drove an old red Chevy sedan. He looked like he was maybe 40 to 45 years old. Anyway, one night at the usual 1 a.m. time, Dave pulled into the gas station. No other customers were here. It was just me sitting in the corner waiting out the time. When Dave walked in though, there was something different about him. He was dripping in sweat, and he was rushing through the aisles, searching for something specific. When he finally found what he was looking for, he hurried up to the counter and tossed it down for me to ring up. It was a master lock, like one for locking up a bicycle. I really didn't feel like it was appropriate for me to question him, but with the guy sweating and being in a rush, I just felt a little off about this. "It's good to see you again, Dave. You just get a new bike?" I asked in a friendly manner, hoping it would come off as just casual conversation. He didn't even look at me. Instead, he fumbled around for his wallet and started yanking out cash in a hurry. I left it at that and just rang him up, then watched him rush into his car and pull away. Something was definitely weird. But hey, maybe he just got a new bicycle and had been riding it around for a couple hours and needed to get back to wherever he parked it so he could lock it up before it was stolen. Maybe that's a stretch, but it was the best I could come up with. The rest of the night passed by, and so did several more days. I didn't see him for almost a whole week, which was odd considering he usually came in every night. It wasn't until my Wednesday shift that I saw him again. It was drizzling outside, so the first several hours went by really slow. I was leaning back in my chair and looking out the window at the rain coming down when his red car pulled into the parking lot. As soon as he parked, he got out and rushed inside. I greeted him as he entered, but he ignored me. He hurried through the aisles and was talking under his breath. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but he sounded frustrated, and I got really uncomfortable, like my gut was telling me something was wrong. Then I heard a thud. My eyes shifted to the window, looking at the direction it came from, and the only thing there was Dave's car. It was a loud thud too, like someone kicking the inside of the door. After a second, I looked back at Dave. He wasn't rushing anymore. He was standing in the aisle, staring directly at me, as if I'd just discovered something that I shouldn't have. There was another thud, but my eyes were fixed on Dave as I could feel panic rushing through my body. Then he quickly looked away and hurried out the door. I was still stunned, but managed to get my phone out and snap a picture of his license plate as he drove away. I called the police immediately. That night felt extremely long as I waited for any updates from them. And it wasn't until I got home around 6 a.m. that I received a call from the police. They found the guy from the license plate I gave them, and they found the woman that he had kidnapped. Apparently, he had just moved into a new small cabin on the edge of town less than a week ago, and he had no registered prior address, so they had no way to know what he'd been up to before this incident. Luckily, they saved this woman before she was harmed, though. Also, it turned out Dave wasn't his real name, which isn't surprising, but at least he's locked up for good now. This was a few months ago, while driving for DoorDash. I only drive as a side gig, maybe 10 to 15 hours a week. This night I was only doing a couple orders since it was already late, and I had picked up a small order around 1 a.m. It was to be delivered to a business building somewhere across town, which was apparent by the address. This was a normal thing, usually for overnight workers or whatever. When I pulled into the parking lot, though, it was empty. No cars at all, and it didn't look like there was a parking lot behind the building either. I parked in a spot near the front and got out with the food. The place was definitely an office building of some kind and was smaller than most, being only 2 stories and not very wide. All the lights were off in the windows though, aside from one light behind the front door. I walked up to the door and checked the app, seeing it has specific drop-off instructions to enter the main hallway and leave the bag outside of room 232. I looked through the door in the building, seeing this hallway with a bunch of closed doors on either side. Delivering to specific rooms I'd only done at hotels, so this was kind of new for me. I tested the door, pushing on it, and it was unlocked, so I stepped inside. I expected to hear people working, moving around, or talking, but instead didn't hear anything. There wasn't a single sound in the whole building. It was just white noise from the overhead lights buzzing above me. As I passed the first few doors though, they were all numbers in the 100s, like 102 and 106. The room the instructions said to leave it at was in the 200s, so I assumed that meant it was on the 2nd floor. In the middle of the hallway was the doorway leading to the staircase. It was held open with a wedge door stopper on the floor, but the lights weren't on. I stepped in and up to the bottom of the staircase, then looked up. The whole stairwell was pitch black. Not even any light was coming from above where the room was supposed to be for me to drop it off at. Again, I started to notice the eerie silence, and it sent a chill through me. I was always one to do whatever the instructions say, so I'd get good reviews. But this was the first time I told myself that this was too sketchy. I stepped out of the stairwell and back into the hallway. And just as I did, the door right across from me opened. The lights in that room were off, but a man emerged from behind the door and stepped into the hallway. He was wearing street clothes and just didn't look like an office worker at all. But he stood in front of me and pointed past me at the stairwell, 232 is up there. I nodded, but didn't move, and neither did he. He just looked me in the eyes, with a look like he was suppressing his anger. After an intense few seconds, I dropped the bag on the ground and started quickly walking to the exit. The man didn't follow me, but I heard his footsteps go into the stairwell and up the stairs as I left the building. I got in my car and left. I didn't know what that was, or if I was maybe overreacting about it, so I didn't call the police. The following day, though, the police actually called me. Apparently the office reported a break-in, and in the CCTV footage, they saw my car and license plate, tracking it back to me. They also had footage of the break-in, and so they called me in to question me about any information I might have. I didn't have much to give, but it turned out there were actually 3 people that broke inside. One was downstairs, who I saw, but the other 2 were shown on the cameras to be hiding at the top of the stairs, seemingly waiting for me to go up. Disturbingly, several other delivery orders were made to that same office that night. All of the other drivers were smarter than I was, though, leaving the orders outside by the front door. What would have taken place in that office had any of us gone up to the second floor is unknown. But hopefully police can find the 3 men before anyone falls victim to it. My name is Caleb Fletcher. I'm 16 years old, and this took place around 8 to 9 months ago, on the 24th of August, which was a Saturday. School had been going on for about 2 weeks, so to de-stress a little, I decided to see if my friends, while called Griffin and Broly, wanted to hop on Fortnite. My mom and sister were out shopping, my dad was working, and I was bored. It was around 8 p.m. when we finally got on to play, because I had decided to make pizza rolls beforehand and ended up burning the batch. After a few rounds, I could tell my friends were getting tired of losing, so they got off after only an hour. I planned on just lying down with my phone and going to bed. That was until I heard my 2 dogs barking outside. What? It's not unusual for them to bark, given how people typically walk on the side of the road, but I still looked anyway, just to make sure. I didn't see anybody, but seconds after looking out the window, I heard our garage door open and shut. That usually means my dad is home from work, but I didn't see his van outside, and he had texted me earlier, telling me that he would be working late tonight. I decided to walk downstairs into the dining room and look out the window to get a better view. From there, I could see that our driveway was empty. There wasn't a person or vehicle in sight. I wasn't the type to go investigate, so I ran back up to my bedroom and texted my family group chat to ask if anybody was home. I told my mom about the garage door, and she told me to turn off the lights, lock my bedroom, and stay there until she got home. So I did just that. About 15 minutes later, I thought I heard our wooden floor downstairs creaking, like someone was trying to be sneaky. I didn't have anything to use as a weapon, so I unclipped my microphone's boom arm from my desk and quietly opened the door. I walked out onto our upstairs balcony and looked over, trying to see if I could spot anyone hiding or anything suspicious. I stupidly yelled, "Is anybody there?" like they were really going to answer. I thought everything was fine though, until I saw a large silhouette of someone standing underneath the balcony. I panicked and ran to the closest room with a door, which happened to be my small bathroom. The intruder must have known I noticed them, because I heard loud and fast footsteps running up our stairs as I locked myself in the bathroom. I had stupidly left my phone in the bedroom, which was the room right next to me. After I built up enough courage, I bolted into my bedroom, locking the door as soon as I got in. My sister's room was right across from mine, and its door was open, so I figured the intruder must have been in there. After locking my bedroom door, I grabbed my phone and typed 911 into it. Just before I called, I noticed that the storage room in my wall was open just a tad. I saw a dark brown eye peeking through the crevice, staring into my soul. The pure terror I felt in that moment is something I'll never forget. I'd booked it down the stairs and out my front door, running up the hill to my neighbor's house. He was a police officer. He alerted the other cops while I stayed with his wife, and he went down to investigate. I told him exactly where the intruder was, hiding in my bedroom. Minutes later, I ran back down the hill to see if the intruder had been caught. When I walked in, I saw a tall, skinny man with a gray beard and a dirty black coat being pushed onto the floor by my neighbor as he was getting handcuffed. I'm not allowed to be home alone anymore, and we have better security around our house now. My family was just happy to know I wasn't hurt, and they were thankful for my neighbor's bravery. I don't wish an experience like this on anybody, not even my worst enemy. I'm a manager at a mid-sized grocery store. I do 10-hour shifts and work mostly overnights. At the time, our store was having some staff issues that made pretty much every department understaffed and overworked, and overnight stocking was no exception. I had one guy that would help me 5 nights a week, but that was it other than me. This was on his day off, so it was only me working. I got in at 10 and was alone by 10:15. After running some numbers in the office, I started pulling out loads of boxes to the aisles to start unpacking and stocking. Even though I had no help this night, I still had to get everything done, so I was working hard and as quickly as I could. I didn't even stop for a break or anything. But suddenly a tapping sound echoed through the store. I stopped and listened, hearing it happen again, and it sounded just like someone tapping on a window at the front of the store. I looked at my watch for the first time since I started working, and it was 2 a.m. Time had flown by, but there was no reason anyone should be here. I walked down the aisle and to the front, where I quickly saw someone outside the store. He was leaning against the window and trying to look inside. He spotted me as I walked up and stared at me. When I was just on the other side, I asked what he wanted. The man, looking like he was homeless, told me to open the door. He had a straight face, no smile or anything. I said we were closed and he couldn't be here, then turned to walk away, but the man immediately banged on the window. Not tapping like he was before. This was now harsh banging. I looked back at him, and he was clearly enraged, with his fist against the glass. Thinking this guy was crazy, I told him I'd call the cops if he doesn't leave, then started pulling my phone out to show I was serious. And only then did he step away from the window. He still had that angry look as he walked away and into the parking lot. Seeing him leave, I put my phone away and got back to work. We get a lot of crazy customers around here, so I didn't think on it too much. And again, I had to focus on getting my work done. I was only able to get a small cart of boxes stocked, so it was maybe 15 minutes later when a sudden sound echoed through the store. It sounded like something metal snapping or scraping. I quickly dropped what I was doing and ran up to the front. Nobody was at the windows, so I went up to the entrance door. It was one of those revolving glass doors, which uses a bolt lock on the top to keep it from opening when we close the store for the night. Right away, I saw that bolt was missing. Like not even just unlocked, the entire bolt was gone. I pressed my hand on the door and it glided around, completely allowing anyone to get in. I could feel my face turn white as I realized what this meant, and I knew I needed to call the police immediately. I turned around to go to the front office, but was instantly looking into the face of that guy from before. He was only a few feet from me, still having that enraged stare. I didn't hesitate to run out the revolving door, hearing the guy follow close behind me. As I ran out into the parking lot, an old van came speeding up to the front. It nearly hit me, but I just kept running until I got to my car. When I rushed in, I noticed the guy wasn't chasing me anymore, and the van was now speeding out of the parking lot. I called the cops and spent the next couple hours explaining what happened. It wasn't until the next day that we got security footage of the man breaking inside, but it wasn't the best image quality. We can say almost for sure that they were trying to get me into their van, but we have no way to know why. I'm sure if I'd not been as quick though, I probably wouldn't have ever been seen again. I was delivering a truckload to a company on the far west coast, coming from the east coast. The route across the country is one I've taken many times before, being a truck driver for almost 20 years. It's always the same every time I make one of these drives. Same roads, same truck stops, and same everything. Over these 20 years though, I've never really had anything crazy happen. I've had a few odd scenarios, but they'd never amounted to anything. So when I was driving this route again, I had no worries in my mind. It was just another day on the job. About 20 hours into the route, a storm started coming over and slowing down my driving. It was late too, so by then I was already looking for the next truck stop to sleep at. As I drove though, a very sudden light appeared behind me. The road I was on was flat and straight, so I would have seen them coming in my mirror, but it was all of a sudden that they were right behind me. Maybe they had just turned on their lights or something. I didn't know, but they very quickly came right up to the back. I kept my eyes on them until they got so close that they were completely covered by the trailer. All I could see were their headlights reflecting off the back. But then their lights shut off. I maintained my speed and kept looking back at my mirrors, trying to see if they were still behind me, but I had no way to know. For someone to turn off their lights in the middle of a heavy storm was insane though, and to be tailing behind me so close was just as insane. Thankfully, the sign showed a truck stop was only 5 miles ahead, so at least I knew I was close to getting away from whatever this was. I didn't want to jump to conclusions based on just some weird behavior, but as a trucker, it's hard not to think about the possibility of it being an attempted robbery, especially when alone on the road at night. For the rest of the 5 miles, I saw no signs of them behind me. I was still on edge because I couldn't really see anything anyway, but I started feeling less worried as I was coming in on the truck stop. I pulled in, trying to check my mirrors to see if they followed, but with the rain and lack of lighting, it was really too hard to tell. The truck stop was mostly empty though, aside from a few trucks at the gas pumps. I pulled off to the side and parked in the middle of the lot. After waiting a minute and getting some of my stuff organized, I opened the truck door and leaned my head out, looking along the side of the trailer. I was drenched from the rain in just a matter of seconds, but from what I could tell, there was no car behind me. I closed the door and finally felt a bit of relief, grabbing my pillow and blanket from the passenger side. I locked the doors, turned off the truck, and tried to get some shut-eye. The rain pounding on the metal roof made it easy to fall asleep, blocking out any possible sounds coming from other trucks pulling in and out. When I woke up though, I felt I had only been asleep for a few minutes. I looked around, seeing it was still dark out and the storm was the same, if not worse. But before I could check my mirrors, a loud thump shook the truck. My eyes opened wider. I reached for the door handle and opened it, looking out at the back of the trailer. Through the rain, I could barely see the outline of a car with its headlights off, then 2 men moving around in front of it. Terrified, I hesitated to step out and confront them. And as I sat there in that moment of hesitation, the door suddenly slammed against my body, shoving me back further into the driver's seat. Another man stood outside, yelling at me to stay where I was, then slamming the door again. His right hand was shoved in his hoodie, and with 2 other men behind the truck, I was in no position to try anything. I could feel the truck shake as I just sat in place with the guy outside my door watching my every move. He didn't even look away for a second. This went on for a few minutes, then they ran back to their car and drove off. I was still in shock, watching their car disappear onto the road. I called the police and put in a report, but no information ever came up on who the men were. All I know is that if I had been any less aware and had just tried to drive off at first sight of the men, I probably wouldn't have been able to make it out as safely as I did. This was in 2016. My parents had just moved to the West Coast, and I was on my way driving there to visit them. A lot of the way there is pretty empty, with only a few gas stations spread out down the long highway. At some point during my second night of driving, my check engine light came on in my car. I wasn't exactly surprised because my car was old and not very reliable. But I wasn't really a car person either, and I had no clue what could be going on with it. I looked up where the next gas station was. It was another 30 miles away, but I really had no choice but to make it there. However, my car decided to make the choice for me instead though, as the engine suddenly cut out, leaving me coasting along the side of the road, until I eventually stopped. I tried everything I could to get it working again. I even got out and looked under the hood for any possible causes of the problem, but I saw nothing. Honestly, I thought this was just the final leg of my car. In the meantime, all I could do was find a way to get help. I pulled my phone out, and I immediately felt my stomach drop as I had no service. I tried a few calls anyway, but obviously none of them went through. After 30 minutes of trying to find a solution, I realized I really only had one option, which was to hitchhike a ride. I'd never done it before, and I was kind of nervous, not really knowing what to expect. I always found it as a strange thing that I never thought I'd ever do. I stood out there on the side of the road and just waited. Every 15 or so minutes, a single car would pass by, but none of them stopped for me. This went on for hours. It was probably 2 or 3 a.m. before I saw the headlights of another car coming down the road. I stuck my thumb out, assuming it would pass by like all the rest, but to my surprise, they started pulling over. It was a black pickup truck, and I couldn't really see the driver until I walked around to the side of their car. He was a very skinny man with a long, thin face, and matched with his long black hair, it was a little unsettling. "Need a lift?" he said happily with a big grin. Something really put me off about this guy, but honestly, I was tired, and this might be my only opportunity to get a ride, so I didn't pass it up. I hopped in the back seat. I felt like it would have been awkward if we didn't have some small talk, so I asked him what he was up to tonight. "Just cruising on the highway," he responded, like it was a hobby of his or something, which was kind of strange since we were in the middle of nowhere. I was surprised he didn't ask me what I was up to or why I needed a ride, but I tried to think of another question just to keep the conversation going. The man interrupted my train of thought, though, when he looked at me for a few seconds in the mirror. "You don't have any weapons on you, right?" "Just making sure I'm safe," he said, with again that odd smile of his. I said no, thinking it was a strange question to bluntly ask, but maybe he really was just trying to watch out for himself. I don't know, but after that I stopped talking. 10 more minutes went by as I just stared out the window before the man made a sudden turn off the highway and onto a dirt road. I immediately sat up and looked around, realizing this was definitely not right. "Where are we going?" He shot a quick look at me, then continued to drive without answering. I asked him again, more loudly, as the fear was building up. "Where are you taking me?" At this point, I knew that no matter what, the next time this car stops, I was going to bolt, so I got ready with my hand on the door. As he drove down this beaten dirt road, suddenly a small farmhouse appeared in the dim lights. Its front door was wide open, and the whole place looked like it was decaying and falling in on itself. Once we got up closer, he suddenly slammed on the brakes. I jolted forward into the seat, and the man instantly swung his door open and ran around to the side door. I swung mine open as well and sprinted out, heading right for the tree line. The man ran around the car and came running up behind me, but once we were in the woods, it was so dark that I could only hear his footsteps and could no longer see him, even though he was just 10 or 15 feet behind me. I took a sharp turn, getting behind a tree and holding my breath. His footsteps came right up past me and continued further into the woods. A whole minute passed before I heard his creepy voice call out for me. Over and over, he'd repeat the same lines in the same tone of voice. "Come on, let's go back. I'll give you a ride. I wasn't trying to scare you." It was extremely disturbing. Even worse, I never heard his footsteps go back toward the car, so I had no idea where he was or if he was lurking in the dark somewhere nearby. I knew I had to leave though, so I started quietly walking in the direction of the main road, or at least what I thought was that direction. I really couldn't see anything, but once I was deeper in the woods, I pulled my phone out and turned the brightness on low. Somehow, I happened to have service now. I almost wanted to cry from the relief. I dialed 911 and had them track the call so they knew where I was. Thankfully, I made it back to the main road and met 2 officers there. By that time, the man and the car were somehow gone. I don't know how he managed to get out of there without being seen. As for the farmhouse, it was just what it looked like. Some old abandoned place, which makes it even stranger that the man knew exactly where it was and turned into it on purpose. I have no idea what he was going to do. I'm just glad I didn't have to find out. This was only a few months ago. I was spending the weekend cozying up inside, as it was the end of winter, and these were the last few days of cold before it was supposed to start heating up. This night, it was rainy and cold, so I had nothing better to do than watch some movies and relax. But it was sometime not too long after dinner that there was a knock at the door. I got up and walked over, but looking out the peephole, I didn't recognize the man. He was wearing some brown jacket and a beanie, and he was holding a snow shovel. Seeing as there wasn't any snow on the ground, I didn't understand what he was here for. I cracked the door just an inch and asked what he wanted. It took all but 5 seconds of listening to him to know he was up to no good. He stumbled over his words and was trying to tell me a whole story about how he was just a friendly guy looking for any jobs to do in my yard. Something felt off about it and unnatural, so I said no thanks and started shutting the door, but the guy quickly put his hand on it. For a second, he just stared at me, keeping the door open, before he let go. I shut and locked it, and after processing what happened, I looked back out the window. He walked down to the sidewalk and disappeared in the rainy fog. I watched for another minute to make sure he'd actually left for good. Then I went back to my movie. The guy was definitely sketchy, but I didn't think he would come back or anything. It would probably just go on to the next house. The rain had picked up over the next hour. I was still in the living room and had started another movie, although I knew I was probably too tired to finish it. My eyes were drifting in and out, but randomly, there was a thump above me that shook me awake. It was just one thump and was kind of hard to tell how loud it actually was with the rain outside. But what was odd about it was that it was definitely from above me. I got up and walked upstairs, looking for anything fallen over, or even a leak in the ceiling that might have made the house settle a bit. However, I found nothing. It could have been one of the gutters clicking out of place from the heavy rain, or really anything else, so I ignored it. I went back downstairs, then being more awake now, I decided to finish the rest of the movie. By the time I'd finished it and was ready to go to bed, it was nearly 12 a.m. I shut off the TV and went around turning off all the lights downstairs. But as I was walking upstairs to go to bed, I could very quickly feel the temperature drop as I got closer to the top of the steps. Maybe I was too tired to give it much thought, but when I got upstairs and started closing each of the doors that I'd opened earlier, I noticed something from the corner of one of the rooms. The window was cracked open. I must have stared at it for a whole 10 seconds, thinking how impossible that was and just being extremely confused. I walked over and looked at it closer. It was one of the windows that had a small roof overhang under it, and before I closed it, I barely could see an imprint on the window sill of what looked like a shoe. I could feel the blood rush from my face as I turned around and just listened for a moment. The low creaking of the house, combined with the rain speckling the roof, only made me more unnerved, knowing someone was in my house right now. I began slowly walking, as quietly as I could, back into the hallway. All the other doors were still open, making me feel like someone's eyes could be watching me right now through one of the doorways. I was able to make it downstairs though, and from there I got my phone and hid in the garage, calling 911. It took 5 minutes for the first officer to arrive. I heard nothing but the rain during that time. Once I let the officer in, I waited on my porch as he searched the home. About 2 minutes later, I heard him call out upstairs, and then he came down, holding a guy in handcuffs. I quickly recognized him as the man who showed up on my doorstep earlier in the night, and he had a terrible look of anger as he passed by me and was thrown in the car. Putting all the pieces together, the guy had climbed up onto my roof, which was likely the cause of the thump I heard hours ago. Then he got in through the second-story window, which I never had thought to even lock. Most disturbing, though, is that the officer said he was hiding in the master bedroom, which I was literally 30 seconds from entering and maybe even falling asleep without any idea he was in there. The guy even took his shoes off after climbing in the window to not let his shoe prints show on the carpet. So the fact that I saw the tiny imprint on the windowsill is a miracle. With him going directly to my bedroom, his intentions were clearly malicious, and thankfully the judge agreed. It's only been a few months since, but I still have sleepless nights where I can't help but feel like someone is hiding inside my home in the middle of the night. Oh. I was driving back from my friend's place in Wisconsin. I live right outside of Chicago, which is about a 6-hour drive, so I decided to do it all in one go. However, I didn't anticipate leaving so late. I wasn't on the road until 8 p.m., but I absolutely had to be home for work the following day, so there was no option to hang out any longer. If you aren't familiar with Wisconsin, it's mostly flat with a ton of forests all over the northern parts and small towns scattered throughout. The biggest cities are closer to the border, nowhere near where I was. My buddy's place was in one of these small towns, so pretty much right out of the gates, it was barren forest roads. There were a few cars here and there, but once I was 30 minutes out and the sun had set, there wasn't a single other car. I probably went a whole 2 hours without seeing anyone else on the road. The endless flat forest on either side of me was so repetitive that it was making me sleepy. It definitely didn't help that I was so tired from hanging with my friend all weekend either. I was trying everything to stay awake, but at just around 11 p.m., I actually saw something up the road. I opened my eyes a bit wider and could tell it was a person. They were standing on the shoulder and had their thumb out, clearly looking for a ride. For some reason, the very first thought that came through my mind was that having company in the car would surely help keep me awake. I almost instinctively began slowing down, and as I got closer, they started walking down the shoulder toward my car. I rolled the window down and pulled up next to them. "Hey, I just need a ride into the next town, if you've got a spare seat for me." It was really dark out, and I couldn't see much of him, but he sounded tired. I let him into the back seat. It wasn't until I started pulling away that the thought even popped into my head about why he was out here. I mean, the middle of the woods in the middle of the night was kind of a weird place to be. I looked in the mirror. The guy was looking at me through the shadow that covered the back seat. He looked like he was 30-ish with stubble and a buzz cut, but I didn't see a backpack or anything with him. "So, what brought you out here?" he asked me. I told him I was at my friend's place for the weekend and was heading back home to Chicago. Then I asked him the same question. His straight face turned into a fake smile. "Oh, I was just walking on a trail in the woods and got lost along the way. Found the road and figured it best to catch a ride." I thought about his answer for a second. I didn't know about any trails or really anything at all in these parts of the woods, but even if there was, he would have had to drive to get here. Why didn't he mention that? Wouldn't he want me to take him to the trailhead instead of into town? I don't know. I was more awake and aware now, and it was making me uneasy the more I thought about it. But then the guy suddenly told me to stop. He told me to pull over and drop him off here. I cautiously did as he said, pulling the car onto the shoulder and parking. We were maybe 5 miles down the road from where I picked him up, and there was still nothing but dense forest all around. The guy quickly opened the door. Without saying anything, he started rushing away, heading for the trees. I was super weirded out and concerned about this whole thing, and at this point I just wanted to get out of there. But he left the door open, and when I leaned into the back seat to shut it, I noticed a drawstring bag tucked under the passenger's seat. It wasn't mine, it was definitely his. I called out for the guy, and he turned around. "Hey, you left your bag." He stood with a straight face and wide, frustrated eyes, staring at me for several uncomfortable seconds. Then he came back. "Your bag, you left it right here." I pointed under the seat, and he hesitated for another several seconds before grabbing it abruptly and turning around, hurrying back into the forest. I reached over and shut the door, then left the area as fast as I could. I was relieved to be away from that guy, knowing that something was definitely up with him. But it was only a few minutes down the road, and I started to pick up on an awful odor from the back seat. It got increasingly worse over the next 30 minutes, until I got into another small town. I stopped at a gas station and used my phone light to look into the back seat. On the carpet under the passenger seat, right where the drawstring bag had been sitting, there was a deep red stain. I almost threw up as I ran into the gas station and called the police. I gave them all the info I had on what happened, and they cut out the piece of carpet from my car to get tested. They also did a search for the man, but came up empty-handed, only finding a few footprints near the spot I picked him up at. I don't know exactly what was in that bag, but it seems like he was trying to plant it in my car as a means to cover something up. We still have no idea who he was or what he was up to that night. I was working a quick DoorDash shift on a Monday night. I got out of my day job at 7 and decided to make a few deliveries. It was a pretty regular, quiet night with nothing much to note. I delivered about 7 or 8 orders before I took my last one for the night. I drove it down to the house and dropped it off, then started heading back into town where my apartment was. It was around 10 o'clock now, and after that delivery, I was about 20 minutes out in the farmland that surrounds our town. A couple minutes into my drive back, I saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. I slowed down, and the man moved over a little bit, but not enough to be out of my way. Once I got closer, he looked right at me and stuck his thumb out. In my headlights, I could tell he was an older guy, like early 50s, and he had a large backpack over his shoulders. Since I was already slowing down, I figured I'd be helpful and ask if he needed a ride into the city, since I was heading that way anyways. He leaned on the windowsill and thanked me for stopping. His eyes looked heavy and exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. But he seemed nice enough, so I agreed to give him a ride. What I wasn't expecting, though, was for him to immediately open the passenger door and sit in the seat right next to me. It didn't really matter, I guess, but I felt like it was usually common courtesy to get in the back seat. As he got situated, I looked past him at where he came from. It was a field of tall grass, just a huge farm or something. "You from around here?" what brings you out to the farmlands?" He looked over at me. "Just making my way across the country to visit my family. Don't have a car, so I've been hitching rides." I thought that was pretty interesting, so I asked more about where he was from, but he gave me very vague and uninterested answers. A couple times I caught him looking into my back seat. Not just quick glances though, like he was running his eyes through the whole back seat and looking for something. Something about this guy started to make me feel off. He wasn't talking much and was just acting really unusual. "Is everything okay?" I asked. I still had my eyes on the road, but he didn't say anything, so then I looked over at him. My eyes were drawn to his disturbing stare before I noticed the knife he had clenched in his right hand. "Stop the car." I didn't say a word and parked right in the middle of the road. I was terrified and just thought if I let him take whatever he wanted, then I'd get out unharmed. So that's exactly what I was going to do. As soon as the car was in park, I turned to open my door, but he quickly stopped me. "Get in the back," he demanded, still clenching the knife. I froze up for a moment, realizing we were in the middle of empty fields, and that if I get in the back, I'll probably never have another chance to escape. He told me a gun, and that's also when I noticed his large backpack was slightly open by his feet, revealing a thick bundle of rope. I had no choice but to try my luck escaping now, before it was too late. I opened the door and jumped out of the car in one swift motion. The man tried jumping across the front seat to grab me, but I sprinted to the other side of the road and into the tall grass. I kept on running through the field until I felt like he couldn't find me. Then I stood still and waited. He yelled a few times from the road, but then it went quiet. All I could hear was the wind blowing the grass around. I stood still and motionless for a good 15 minutes before I slowly made my way back toward the road. I looked through the grass and could see my headlights still beaming onto the pavement and the driver doors still open. The man was nowhere to be seen. After scoping it out for another minute, I sprinted up and grabbed my phone, then ran back into the grass and called 911. I didn't know if he was still hiding somewhere, waiting for me, so I didn't risk staying up there. Eventually, the police showed up though. I couldn't believe the man didn't drive away in my car. He must have just grabbed his backpack and run off into the other field, or maybe even tried chasing me through the grass, then just didn't find me. Either way, it clearly showed that his intentions were not to just rob me of my belongings, which makes the scenario 100 times more disturbing. I gave the police a description of the man, but there still haven't been any sightings.